now press go live. Okay. Now go back to the chat. And click on the chat. Okay.
Hello everybody, Mel live, and as you can see I have a completely different studio set up here. It's so exciting, and I'm multiple streaming, but I wanted to jump on and have a little test, but also too I wanted to have a chat with you about the difference between narcissistic apology and genuine apology, because a lot of people get really tripped up on this, don't know the difference, and get into a whole heap of hot water. Okay, let's unpack this, because a genuine apology is more than just two little words. And we know what those two little words are. Those words are, I'm sorry. But hey, the thing is, unconscious individuals and abusers often hate saying these words. You know how much you've had to try to fight to get a simple, I'm sorry. And then even if they do say they're sorry, those words, those two words will get thrown in your face. And it doesn't feel wholesome, because when they say, hey guys, it's awesome to see you here on the live. But you know, when these people say these words, they're often really angry, and they declare things like, I've said I'm sorry, what more do you want from me? And it's like, really? But is that enough for somebody to just hurtle the words I'm sorry at you? Of course it isn't, because it doesn't feel like it connects with us. We certainly don't feel safe when we don't receive an apology, which is genuine, and we certainly don't feel safe when we get an apology that is angry and defensive. So why don't we feel safe? And oh my gosh, beautiful thrivers, we've got to listen to our bodies. It's so important. So let's unpack this. Why doesn't it land for us? Well, first of all, hey guys, how you going? We've got Kate and we've got Matthew and, you know, beautiful thrivers on. Okay, so why? Because first of all, it's an insincere apology. And what does that mean? It's a lack of accountability. This person doesn't believe that they've done anything wrong. They certainly haven't taken responsibility for how their actions affected another person. And we know they lack empathy. This person is unable to put themselves in a position to understand your personal experience, which means they've got a lack of basic humanity. Now, the bottom line is, with a faux apology or no apology, you don't feel valued, you don't feel cared for, you don't feel loved, and therefore you don't feel safe. And you also know from experience, if we're going to be really honest with ourselves, that this person is going to reoffend. The glitches, the oversights, the sense of entitlement that causes their awful actions that distress other people, meaning you in this conversation, they've never been owned, they've never been acknowledged, and they've never been adjusted. They haven't taken responsibility for what they do. And we know that when we're forced to overlook a non-apology, then definitely what happens there is we are signing up for more of the same. Point blank. That's exactly what is going to happen. So it's just, can you relate to this? I'm sure you can relate to this, because it is just awful when that happens. So let me just have a look at some of my other notes on this, because there's some really other important stuff that I want to look at this. Okay. Now, the other thing about this too, which is just awful, is that this person is going to reoffend, and they are not going to own what they've done. And they haven't done what's a genuine apology. And the reason is because they are not a true self to themselves. They don't acknowledge their own emotional self and needs. And because they're living their life through a delusional false self, which means that they've killed off their inner being, completely disowned it, and put a fictitious character in its place. So they don't acknowledge themselves as a soul, as a flesh and blood soul human being with emotions. They really don't. And they have no ability to acknowledge you as such. So a narcissist, first of all, does not want partnership and does not want connection because they feel incredibly unsafe with that, because it means they lose superiority and power over if they combine with you. An apology is all about leaning in. It's all about acknowledging another. And it's all about saying, I care, which is incredibly unsafe to a egotistical no self who's living their life through a false self, through their ego. They simply cannot do that. Now, because you haven't received a true apology, or if you have, it's one thrown in your face, you, I hope, can understand that first of all, this person doesn't acknowledge that they've done anything wrong. And if they do throw an apology in your face, usually what that is about is, I've been caught out. That's what I'm angry about. That's what I'm upset about. Not how it affected you, but I don't get to fulfill my agenda or get away with what I was getting away with in the shadows. It's been exposed and I'm angry about that. I'm upset about that. So you may hear things like, well, do you think I'm happy about what I did? I mean, come on, that's not an apology. It's an atypical narcissistic apology, and it's certainly not an apology. So what is needed for a genuine apology? Well, first of all, an acknowledgement that I hurt you is a genuine apology. So we might think that the words I'm sorry are enough, but they can actually be used as throwaway words simply to appease you, simply to get it over and done with, or maybe to keep getting access to you and mining the goodies from you, which feeds the false self or stops a narcissistic injury. So the words I'm sorry on their own are not enough. What is actually needed is an acknowledgement. And this is why generally with a narcissist, if you poke it a little bit, you know, you might get the crocodile tears because they can act and say, I'm really sorry, right? Which is rare, but it can happen. Especially if they learn that gets what they want. But what you've got to do is actually say, well, what are you sorry for? What do you realize you've done? Because not a perfect person, just a person with empathy and care for you, capacity and desire for relationship, which means empathy, connection, and an understanding of another person's emotional experience. These are just really baseline requirements, and we've been brought up to think they're not, but I promise you they are. So you ask, well, what is it that you're actually sorry for? What are you sorry for? And watch the three-ring circus. If it's an unconscious person or a narcissistic person, which really is the same thing, you can't have a healthy relationship with somebody unconscious or narcissistic, and they refuse to lean in and come into your skin and acknowledge what happened with you. So therefore, what you've got is no ability to reform. Because without that acknowledgement, they can't actually say to you by word, deed, and action that, you know, you have my word that I care about you and I never want to do that again. And I'm going to do all that I can to, adjust because you're important to me. The relationship is important to me. And that is actually a genuine apology. Now, to pin a narcissist down for that, and we've all tried, just say yes in the chat if you've tried to do that. Okay? Just say yes in the chat if you've tried to do that. If you've tried to lecture and prescribe and you've tried to hold a narcissist accountable and you've tried to tell them, please Google apology, I didn't feel that apology, and they say, well, I apologize. What more do you want? You're disloyal. You're high maintenance. You're oversensitive. You get the spin, right? Or a narcissist might say to you, well, I never intended to hurt you and therefore there's nothing to apologize for. But that's not humanity and that's not empathy because we all have different lenses and we all have different needs. And, it may be as simple as somebody that snores all night now, and you wake up and you say, look, you snored all night. I didn't get any sleep. Now they were asleep. They didn't mean to snore. But for them to say, look, sorry, honey, well, maybe I'll try and stay awake so you can get to sleep. Or maybe, if you really need to get up early for something, how about you sleep in the spare bed? Or I'll try to lose some weight. Or, it's an acknowledgement of care for you that is so, so vital, even though they never meant to snore. It was never intentional. But a narcissist can take that as a slight. Well, because I didn't intend to, and now you're blaming me for how dare you have bad feelings about anything that I've done wrong, which is ridiculous. So, of course, you end up feeling, well, not just upset about the snoring, which you have every right to, and it's not personal, it's just it kept you awake and it makes your life very hard. But now it's like the cover-up of the non-apology, which was very simple, makes matters 30 times worse. So if we continue to accept that kind of behaviour from somebody who does the cover-up and the denial and refuses to care, to have empathy and to lean in, well then we are setting ourselves up for emotional, mental and literal soul health and risk. And this is why it is so much more important to receive a true apology rather than just two little words or refusal to give those words. Because then we're valuing ourselves and we're actually healing up to value ourselves. And really this is what thriving is all about. That we know we don't have the power to change anything outside of our sphere of influence, which is everything that goes on from our skin inwards. That's the only power we have to change. We don't have power to change other people, but we can change how we show up and what we accept. Because what we accept is what we will get. And that's how life works to evolve us. And certainly narcissists evolve us with a sledgehammer because they show us where we're not loving and respecting ourselves and where we haven't healed up enough to develop. And maybe in our childhood we grew up, a lot of us did in our generation, with parents who refuse to, they just don't apologise, And we were lucky to ever hear those two little words. And we were just meant to, shut up and go on with it and not upset other people by speaking up and doing something about it. But now as adults, we can do a different reality. And this has been a huge journey for me about understanding the deservedness of a true apology. And it doesn't mean that somebody has to do backflips and they have to get the 4 steps completely correct, which is I acknowledge what I did to you. Well, I apologize. I'm sorry. I acknowledge what I did to you. I acknowledge how that hurt you, and I'm going to make amends. And really there's 5 steps because people can say whatever they want, but the actions need to change. And really, if we go quantum, there's 6 steps. If we have a serious transgression against us, which is what narcissists do, they would have to do the inner work on their trauma, their unhealed traumas, their fractures, as to why they're so disordered in the way they behave that hurt people, to have any hope of changing their behavior. And the point is they don't, because they won't meet their inner being and they won't do the inner work. So it doesn't ever change. But how you can pick this right here, right now, in your reality of so within, so without, whoever I'm being and deciding and anchoring into is exactly what I'm going to get, is to say, well, unless it's an apology and unless it's from the heart, I am going to remove access. You don't have access to me anymore. Now, I just did this with a major family member, and I've removed access for 3 months. Because of a transgression, which I spoke up and I said, this is how I feel and this is what I need. And point blank, the behavior was, I don't care about your feelings, which means, I'm sorry, you don't have access to me anymore. And I expressed that and I pulled back and I meant it. And I had to. Because here it is, after narcissistic abuse in our growth, and I've done a lot of healing to get there, right? And of course, I had to do the work on the guilt because of this person's state. They're old, they're sick, etc. But I know that I would rather lose another person than ever lose myself again. That is just not negotiable. And I'm very, very clear that if you don't care about my feelings, you don't have access to me, because my feelings is my soul, and that's my being, and that's who I am. That's the engine of me. So I just got an apology a couple of days ago, and it was genuine and it was heartfelt. And I could be really beautiful with that. It was so lovely. I was open to see without fear, because I know I can put the boundary up. There was the approach. My heart was open. I was in my heart center. I was in love, allowing. And it was beautiful and heartfelt. It was gorgeous. And I don't feel unsafe, because I know if we go back to that, well, then we go back to that. Right? No access. So this is really important to do. Very important to do, because the old self, and I know as codependents and fixers, where we've been in the business is, if I can fix and change you into somebody who has empathy and cares and who's responsible for your behavior, well, then I can feel safe and loved. But that's putting a cart in front of a horse that keeps rolling back on us, the horse, and squashing us. Life can't and doesn't work like that. So it is so important for us to say, well, I'm going to put my horse in front of the cart. I'm going to decide, and we don't have to argue, and we don't have to lecture, and we don't have to prescribe. Nobody needs to get our necessity for an apology other than ourselves. And it's like, okay, well, if you can't apologize and you're not genuine, it's not coming from your heart, and I'm not feeling it, well, then I'm not giving you any more access. And I know that can be difficult. It can be really hard when you're co-parenting, or you're sharing a business, or you're in a workplace or whatever, but then you can go modified contact. You don't get my emotional self. You don't get my emotional energy. You don't get my goodies. You don't get my money. You don't get my sex. You don't get my body. You don't get my time. You don't get my resources. You get no. You don't have access to that stuff anymore. You're on your own. Right. And ironically, if we all did this, narcissists couldn't exist, because they wouldn't have access to mining and stealing other people's resources and energy. All right. So I love, and Kate's just saying, thank you for pointing out how safe we can feel by putting up the boundary again. I'm practicing this with my father. Yeah, and this is exactly what I'm doing at the moment too, Kate. We can put up the boundary at any time. Right? This doesn't mean because we've let them back in that they're going to demolish us. That was our old self. And you know, you may still be there, and I was there for a long time. I understand that. Because what we're actually doing is we're trying to source self outside of self, because we haven't done enough quantum inner work to have ourself back and whole. And when we have ourself back and whole, we don't need anybody to be a certain way in order for us to have a great life. We can allow them in when they're behaving, but if they start being callous or cruel or projecting onto us or manipulating us, and it feels funky in our body, our GPS, our God protection system knows, well, then we speak up. And we can speak up not from a place of terror or trauma, like if you don't change, my life is smashed. If we can heal up to be a whole adult in our body, it's like, this is who I am and this is what I need. And meet me there or don't. But it takes development, it takes healing. And that's absolutely what NARP does, the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program. And, you know, you can check it out. It's on my website. It's in my bios. That 10-step process gets you to this place. All right. So anyway, all right, I'm just going to read this because we've got Betty Blues on. Dearest Mel, I hope you read this message, and I'm going to read it out loud. I have a friend who really needs help and healing after severely narcissistic abuse. She's Italian, but speaks but not a word of English. Please, if you could consider a translator of your work, that is going to be coming. I've massively recommended you, and she's now frustrated as she desperately needs your help. Yeah, and I know. We are going to work on that, I promise. And I love you, and thank you forever for helping, healing, and for saving my life. Yay. All right, guys. So I hope that this can really help you a lot. It's just, look, it's a simple, quick live, but these are really important points. And I wanted to test out all my multi-streaming because I'm going to be able to go there and see what actually worked and what didn't. But it's always awesome to hang out with you guys. And this Thursday, what is it, Monday today, my time, it's Sunday, your time. I'm going to be coming on for another Thriver TV, which will be awesome again. And I think that's about it. And I hope the sound and the quality, just let me know, actually, let me know. How was the sound and the picture quality? Because this is going live to 3 platforms at the moment. Just let me know. I think we got a bit of a delay. Yeah. And Kate's saying, it's so helpful to know the road through all these issues is continuing to connect with Source and continuing to heal. Okay, I always love your lives, Mel. Yeah, thank you. And I always love your support, Kate and Faye. You guys are always so supportive. Faye saying it's great. That's really cool. And you know, people who are new to my work, you might want to watch this a few times. But what I really want you to understand too is we don't want to keep reminding ourselves. We want to rebody. We want to do the inner work so that this becomes authentic and it becomes embodied. It becomes an inner standing where it just is, rather than leaving our old traumas and wounds on the inside and then trying to keep learning our way beyond them. That's kind of putting ice cream on top of poop. You know, the late Debbie Ford had that amazing expression which just sums it all up. We need to get the poop out of the cone and then we can put the good stuff in. And that's what trauma removal is, and that's what the inner work is. Yes, we need to re-body and not re-mind. So, okay, awesome. I'm going to go, guys. You're incredible. And thank you so much for hanging out with me today and doing this test with me. And there's more to come on Thursday. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye and I'll talk to you again soon. So much love.